The wind howled like a wounded beast outside, rattling the loose shutters of the Red Lantern Saloon. Inside, in a cramped back room that smelled of whiskey and old tobacco, 18-year-old Ilara lay curled on the cold, splintered floorboards. Sweat drenched her brow as a bolt of pain ripped through her. The storm's roar swallowed her cries, masking the sound from the drunken men in the main room. With one last desperate push, the silence was broken. A sharp, thin wail rose into the night. A child. Her child. Ilara's trembling hands reached forward, aching to touch the tiny life she had fought to bring into the world. But before her fingers could find warm skin, a shadow fell over her. Mrs. Crow, the madam of the saloon, stood there with her sharp black eyes and harder mouth. She snatched the newborn without so much as a word. "Not yours anymore," she hissed, tucking the squirming bundle into her arms. Ilara tried to protest, tried to rise, but pain and blood loss pinned her down. Her voice came out a broken whisper. "Please, let me see him," Mrs. Crow only sneered. "Debt gets paid one way or another, girl." Then she was gone, the child's cries fading into the storm. Hours blurred into seconds and eternity. Ilara drifted in and out of consciousness, every heartbeat feeling slower, heavier. When the first light of dawn crept in, it wasn't warmth that woke her, it was the sound of boots. Two of Mrs. Crow's men hauled her up by the arms, ignoring her groan of pain. Her legs buckled, still weak from birth, but they dragged her along without pause. They pushed her through the swinging doors of the saloon and into the open air. The sky was a washed-out gray, the kind that promised more rain. The streets were already filling with people. Whispers followed her as she stumbled barefoot across the muddy ground. The wooden platform in the town square loomed ahead, the auction block. She was shoved up the steps, her knees nearly giving way. The auctioneer, a rail-thin man with a mouth like a knife slash, grinned at the crowd. "We've got ourselves a special case this morning," he drawled. "Fresh as they come, though I reckon a little worn already." The crowd laughed. Ilara's head hung low, her hair falling like a curtain to hide her face. She felt the eyes on her, appraising, judging, stripping her down to nothing but a price tag. The auctioneer's voice rose above the murmurs. "Startin' bid $5. She's young, still got plenty o' years in her if someone's willin' to patch her up." The first bid came half-heartedly from a ranch hand near the back. Another man, older and with liquor on his breath, offered $6. The numbers crawled upward, 7, 8, 9, each one sounding less like money and more like the tolling of a bell. Damaged goods. Someone muttered. Ilara's vision swam, the world tilted, the edges of her sight dimming. Then a voice, deep and steady, cut through the haze. 25. Heads turned. A man stood near the edge of the crowd, tall and broad-shouldered, his dusted hat pulled low over eyes that missed nothing. His face was weathered by the sun, his jaw set firm. He didn't look at the auctioneer or the crowd. His gaze was fixed on her, unblinking. The auctioneer blinked in surprise. 25? Well now, that's a mighty leap. No one countered. The silence stretched until, with a flourish, the auctioneer brought his gavel down. Crack. Sold. To Mr. Jed Holt. The name seemed to settle over the crowd like dust. A few men muttered, but none challenged it. Jed stepped forward, his boots heavy on the boards. He tipped his hat to the auctioneer, then to Mrs. Crow, who eyed him like a wolf who'd lost a meal. Without a word, he reached out, steadying Ilara as she wobbled on the steps. His grip was firm, but not cruel. "Come on," he said simply. She followed because there was nothing else she could do. Each step toward his wagon felt heavier, her mind a blur of exhaustion and fear. Why had he paid so much? No man spent that kind of money without wanting something in return. As the wagon rolled out of the square, the faces of the townsfolk faded into the mist. Ilara clutched the edge of the seat, every bump in the road jarring through her sore body. Beside her, Jed kept his eyes forward, his jaw locked. The silence between them was thick, broken only by the creak of the wheels and the distant rumble of thunder. Ilara dared a glance at him. His profile was hard, unreadable, carved from the same rock as the hills that rose in the distance. And in that silence, the question burned inside her. What did this man truly want with a woman who could barely stand? The wagon jolted forward, the wooden wheels groaning over the ruts in the dirt road. Ilara sat on the rough bench seat, her body aching with every bump. Jed Holt said nothing, his hands steady on the reins, his gaze fixed on the winding path. Ahead, the storm had passed, but the sky was still heavy with clouds, pressing the world into a muted gray. The coat around her shoulders was his worn, smelling faintly of leather and wood smoke. It swallowed her frame, but it wasn't warmth that kept her silent. It was fear. She didn't know this man, didn't know why he'd bought her, and the weight of that uncertainty was worse than the bruises on her arms. Every so often, Yet's eyes shifted, scanning the trees, glancing over his shoulder at the empty road behind them. His jaw was tight, his grip on the reins firm. He rode like a man expecting trouble. Ilara's mind kept circling back to her child. The baby's thin, frantic cries still rang in her ears, and her stomach twisted with the hollow ache of absence. She wanted to ask Jed if he knew where her baby was. She wanted to demand it. But her throat felt raw, and she couldn't bring herself to speak. They passed out of the town limits and into the wild stretch of open prairie. The wind carried the scent of sagebrush, and the sound of the wheels was joined by the soft creak of leather harnesses. After what felt like hours, the exhaustion that had been gnawing at her since the night before finally won. Her head drooped, her vision blurred, and she slipped into a dark, dreamless sleep. When she woke, it was to the crackle of fire and the scent of something warm cooking. The wagon was gone from beneath her, replaced by a bed, not a straw pallet, but a real bed with clean sheets. She blinked against the light filtering through lace curtains, her body still heavy and sore. A soft voice spoke nearby. "Easy now, child. You've been through more than most could bear." An older woman stood beside the bed, her face lined, but kind. Her hair was streaked with silver, braided neatly down her back. She was stirring a steaming cup of broth, which she pressed into Ilara's hands. "Drink this. You're safe here." Ilara took a tentative sip. The warmth spread through her chest, easing the tremors in her fingers. Where am I?" she managed. "Yet's cabin," the woman replied. "Name's May. I keep the place while he's off tending his land." She adjusted the blanket over Ilara's shoulders with a care Ilara hadn't felt in years. Before Ilara could ask the questions burning in her mind, the door creaked open. Jed stepped in, his hat in his hands. His eyes flicked to her, unreadable. Before he set the hat on a peg, "You'll stay here until you're strong enough to travel," he said simply. Ilara's brows knit. "Travel where?" He didn't answer, only moved to the fireplace and poured himself a mug of coffee. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. Finally he looked at May. "I'll check the horses." Then he was gone, the door closing behind. May watched him go, then sighed. "Don't take it personal. He's not much for talking, but he means well." Ilara wasn't so sure. That night, as the wind sighed through the trees outside, she lay awake in the small bedroom, the events of the last day churning in her mind. Through the thin wall, she heard voices, low, urgent. "They'll come for her," Jed was saying. "I saw the mark on her wrist. That's all they need to track her down." May's voice was quieter, almost pleading. "You can't get mixed up in their business again, Jed. Not after what happened last time." "I'm already mixed up," he replied. "They'll know it was me who bought her. If we're not careful, we'll all end up in the ground." Ilara's heart pounded. She didn't know who they were, but from the way Yet's voice tightened, she knew they were dangerous. And somehow they were connected to her, She pulled the blanket tighter around her, staring at the dark ceiling. The coat still smelled faintly of him. She wasn't sure yet if Jed Holt was her savior or just another man with a price in mind. But one thing was certain. Whatever trouble he feared, it was already on their trail. Morning light spilled through the cabin window, soft but unwelcome. Ilara woke to the sound of water being poured into a basin. May was at her side, wringing out a clean cloth. "You've still got fever," May murmured, pressing the damp cloth to Ilara's forehead. "But you're strong. You'll pull through." Ilara sat up slowly, wincing at the ache that seemed rooted deep in her bones. "What did he mean last night?" she asked quietly. "About the mark on my wrist?" May's hands paused. Her eyes flicked to Ilara's left arm, where a faint, crudely inked tattoo curled along the inside of her wrist, just 3 dark lines forming a broken circle. "You really don't know?" May asked. "I know it was burned into me when I was 14, Ilara said bitterly. "I know I never wanted it." May's gaze hardened. "It's the Iron Circle's brand. They're not just outlaws, they're slavers, debt collectors worse. That mark means you're theirs until they say otherwise, and they don't just let people go." Ilara's stomach turned. "I'm not theirs," she whispered. May squeezed her shoulder. "Jed knows that. But the Circle won't care. They'll hunt you, and they'll take what's theirs, even if it's 6 feet under." Before Ilara could respond, the front door opened, and Jed stepped in. His coat was dusted with the chill of early morning, and his eyes were sharp, scanning the room as though expecting an intruder. "They're in town," he said flatly. May's face drained of color. "Already?" Jed nodded. "3 of them, asking questions about a girl with the mark." His eyes shifted to Ilara, asking about you. Fear rose like bile in her throat. Did they have a child with them?" she asked, her voice trembling. Yet's jaw tightened. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to the table, set down his hat, and finally said, "Not with them. But that doesn't mean." He trailed off, shaking his head. "That doesn't mean what?" Ilara demanded, her voice sharper now. "If you know where my baby is." "I don't," Jed interrupted. "But I know what happens if you go looking without a plan. They'll use the child to bring you back. And once they have you, they won't let you breathe free air again." Ilara's hands curled into fists. "Then help me," she said. "Help me get my baby." Yet's gaze held hers for a long, tense moment. "You don't understand the Circle. I used to ride with them. I know what they're capable of." May looked between them. "Jed," she began, but her voice was uncertain. "I left them because I couldn't stomach what they were doing anymore." Jed said, "But you don't just walk away. And now, thanks to that auction, they know exactly where to find me." The room fell into heavy silence. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Then came the sound of hoofbeats, slow, deliberate. Yet's head snapped toward the door. "Stay in here," he ordered. Ilara ignored him and moved to the window. She froze. A man sat astride a black horse at the edge of the trees. His coat was dark, his hat pulled low, and in his arms was a small bundle. Ilara's breath caught. She couldn't see the child's face, but every part of her knew. It was her baby. She nearly threw the door open, but Yet's hand clamped around her arm. "Don't," he said sharply. "It's a trap. He's here to draw you out." Her voice broke. "That's my child, Jed." "I know," he said, his tone softer now. "But if you run to him, you won't be coming back." The man on the horse sat there for a long moment, as if he could sense their eyes watching from the cabin. Then he turned his mount and disappeared into the trees. Ilara's knees gave way, and she sank to the floor, her hands covering her face. Jed crouched beside her. "I'll find a way," he said quietly, "but you have to trust me." She wanted to believe him. She wanted to think this man who had bought her at an auction might actually mean to save her. But the iron circle had taken her child, and the only thing more dangerous than their cruelty was her desperation to get the baby back. Asterisk. Jed paced the length of the cabin like a caged wolf. Outside, the sun dipped low, staining the horizon in shades of rust and gold. Ilara sat at the edge of the bed, twisting the hem of her sleeve, her eyes fixed on the window as if the man with her baby might ride back into view. May stirred a pot over the fire, but her gaze kept flicking between the two of them. "You can't just sit here waiting for them to make the next move," she said finally. "I'm not," Jed replied without looking up. "But we do this my way. Quiet, careful, and without anyone ending up in a shallow grave." Ilara's voice was sharper than she intended. "You think I care about graves? They have my baby, Jed. Every hour we wait, and every hour we rush in without a plan. They get exactly what they want," Jed cut in. His tone was calm, but there was iron beneath it. "You think that man rode up here for a friendly visit? He was baiting you. If you'd stepped outside, you'd already be halfway back to the Circle's camp with a rope around your wrists." Ilara clenched her jaw. She knew he was right, but knowing didn't make the ache in her chest any less unbearable. That night, after May had gone to her small room and the cabin was dark save for the firelight, Ilara lay staring at the ceiling. Every creak of the wood, every whisper of wind outside made her restless. And in that restlessness, a dangerous thought took root. She didn't have to wait for Jed to act. Quietly, she slipped from the bed, pulling on her dress and boots. The floorboards groaned, but May's door stayed shut. She took one of the lanterns from the table and eased the door open. The cold night air hit her like a slap. The moonlight guided her path through the trees, her boots crunching softly on the frosted ground. She didn't know exactly where to go, but she had a feeling. The river. It was where deals were made in towns like this, where men who didn't want to be seen did their business, and she was right. He was waiting, Vance. His name slid into her mind like a blade. Tall, with a black coat that caught the moonlight in a smile that was all teeth. The brand of the Iron Circle was tattooed on the side of his neck, like a mark of pride. In his arms, swaddled in a faded blanket, was her baby. "Well now," he drawled, as if greeting an old friend. "Didn't think you had it in you to sneak out. Guess motherhood brings out the bravery." Ilara's breath trembled as she stepped closer. "Give her to me." Vance rocked the child gently. "Oh, you'll have her. But you know how the Circle works, Ilara. Everything's a trade." She didn't need him to explain. The meaning was written plain in his smirk. "You want me to come back? Smart girl," he said. "You walk back into camp, no fuss, no trouble, and your little one goes right into your arms. But if you make me wait—" He let the words trail off, the threat hanging in the cold air. Ilara's nails dug into her palms. She hated him. She hated the Circle. But she would walk barefoot into hell if it meant saving her child. She opened her mouth to answer, and a shadow moved in the trees. A hand closed around her arm and yanked her back. She gasped, lantern swinging wildly before a steady grip caught it. Yet's face loomed in the flickering light, his eyes sharp, furious. "Not like this," he hissed. Vance's grin widened. "Jed Holt, didn't think I'd see you playing the hero." Jed ignored him, pulling Ilara behind him. "Go," he ordered her. "Now," Vance's voice turned mocking. "Run then. But you can't outrun the Circle forever." Gunfire cracked through the night. Jed shoved Ilara forward, the shot echoing in the trees. She didn't stop until they were halfway back to the cabin. Her lungs burning, her heart pounding. Then the smell hit her. Smoke. They reached the clearing, and Ilara's stomach dropped. May's cabin was a tower of flame, the roof caving in as sparks shot into the sky. The flames roared like a living thing, devouring the cabin that had been their refuge. The heat pushed them back, forcing Jed and Ilara to the edge of the clearing. Sparks stung Alara's face as she raised her arm to shield her eyes. "May!" she shouted, the name tearing from her throat. Jed didn't answer. He moved around the side of the inferno, his boots sinking into the damp earth. The firelight carved hard shadows across his face. His jaw clenched as his eyes searched for any sign of movement. The roof gave a groan, then collapsed inward, sending a shower of embers spiraling into the night. The smell of charred wood and burning fabric filled the air, thick and choking. When Jed finally returned to her side, his expression was grim. "She's not inside." Ilara's hope flickered, fragile and desperate. "Then she's not here because they took her," Jed said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the crackle of the flames. "They'll use her. Same way they're using your baby as bait." The truth of it sank into Ilara's chest like a stone. Her fists tightened. "Then we go after them." "Now," Jed shook his head. "Not yet. Running in blind will get us all killed." Ilara rounded on him. "You keep saying that, but every hour we wait, they're hurting them. May risked her life for me. And my baby." Her voice broke, but she forced the words out. "She doesn't even know my face, Jed. If I wait any longer, she never will." For a long moment, Jed just stared at her, his eyes unreadable. Then he stepped closer, his voice softer but no less firm. "If you want me to help you, you have to tell me everything. No more holding back. Why does the Iron Circle want you so bad? What did you do to them?" Alara's mouth went dry. She had kept the truth buried for so long it felt like a curse. But the fire was burning away more than wood tonight. It was burning away her lies. "The man who fathered my child," she began, the words tasting bitter, "wasn't a husband, wasn't even a choice." She swallowed hard, forcing herself to meet Yet's gaze. "He was one of the Circle's leaders. They called him Crow. And when he tried to keep me like property, I killed him." Yet's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't interrupt. "They couldn't forgive that, so they sold me. Told the others I was an example of what happens to ungrateful women." Her voice trembled, but she held steady. "I've been running ever since, but they'll never stop. Not while they can use my baby to punish me." Jed nodded slowly, as if fitting together pieces of a puzzle. Crow was a dangerous man. Killing him, you didn't just make enemies. You started a war you can't win alone. Ilara took a step forward. "Then don't let me fight alone." Jed studied her for a long moment. The firelight flickered in his eyes, and for the first time, she thought she saw something like respect there. "All right. But we're not going straight to them. I know a place, an old mining camp in the hills. Some men there still owe me favors. If anyone can help us hit the circle, it's them." Reluctantly, Ilara nodded. She didn't like the idea of delaying, but at least it was movement, not waiting. They set out before dawn, riding in Yet's wagon with what little they had left. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and empty, the air sharp with the coming winter. For a while, the road was quiet except for the creak of the wagon and the distant call of crows. Then, somewhere in the distance, Ilara thought she heard something else, the faint drumming of hooves. Jed heard it too. His head snapped up, eyes scanning the horizon. "Hold on." The sound grew louder. The wagon jolted as Jed urged the horses faster, but it was too late. From both sides of the road, riders burst from the trees, their faces shadowed by hats, guns glinting in the pale morning light. The Circle's brand was etched into the leather of their vests. Ilara barely had time to scream before a rope whipped around her waist, yanking her off the wagon. She hit the ground hard, the air tearing from her lungs. Through the blur of pain, she saw Jed leap from the wagon, his gun already in hand. But 3 men closed in on him fast, forcing him back toward the horses. Hands grabbed her, rough and unyielding, dragging her across the dirt. She kicked, fought, clawed, but they only laughed. The last thing she saw before the world spun was Jed, shouting her name as the riders pulled her into the trees. The ride into the forest was a blur of snapping branches, pounding hooves, and the sting of rope against Alara's wrists. Her captor said nothing, only exchanging the occasional grunt or cruel laugh. The one who had roped her broad-shouldered, with a scar like a lightning bolt across his cheek, kept glancing back at her as if daring her to try something foolish. They pushed deeper into the wilderness until the trees opened into a clearing. There, nestled in the shadow of jagged cliffs, sat the Iron Circle's camp. Dozens of tents ringed a central fire pit, and the smell of roasting meat mixed with the tang of unwashed bodies. The Circle's brand a crude, rusted horseshoe was nailed to a post at the camp's entrance like a warning. They dragged her from the horse and shoved her toward the largest tent. Inside, the air was close and heavy with the scent of whiskey. A lantern swung from the center pole, casting long wavering shadows across the faces of men who looked her over, like she was game brought in from a hunt. Then a woman stepped forward, tall, lean, with hair the color of ash and eyes as sharp as broken glass. "So this is the little rattlesnake," she said. "Crow's killer." Alara forced herself to stand straighter, even though her legs still trembled from the ride. "Where's my baby?" The woman's lips curved into something that was not a smile. "Safe enough, for now. You've met May, haven't you? She's been looking after the little one for us." May. Relief slammed into Alara so hard she nearly collapsed. But she didn't trust the tone in the woman's voice. It was laced with control, a reminder that even her relief was a weapon they could use. The woman gestured to the back of the tent. A flap opened, and there was May holding a small bundle, wrapped in a faded quilt. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and frightened, but she was alive. And in her arms, the tiny face Alara had only glimpsed for moments after the birth's delicate features, eyes shut tight in sleep. Alara's knees almost buckled, but she forced herself forward. She reached for the baby, but a guard stepped between them, shoving her back. "Not so fast," the woman said coolly. "You'll see her, hold her even. But first, you're going to do something for us." Alara's gaze snapped to hers. "I'll do nothing for you." The woman laughed, a sound as sharp as the crack of a whip. "Oh, you will. You'll lure your rescuer here, the rancher, Holt." Jed. Alara's chest tightened. They knew, the woman stepped closer, her shadow falling across Alara's face. "We've been watching. He's clever, but not clever enough to walk away from you. So here's how it goes. You get a message to him. Tell him you're hurt, alone, begging for his help. He rides in, we cut him down, and maybe, just maybe, you and your baby walk away breathing." Alara's mind raced. She didn't know how much of this was bluff, but she couldn't risk it. She glanced at May, who gave the slightest shake of her head, a warning not to agree too quickly. "I'll need proof I'm alive," Alara said, forcing steel into her voice. "He won't believe words alone." The woman's smile widened, as if amused by the spark of defiance. "Fine, we'll give you your proof." 2 guards seized her, hauling her out of the tent and toward the camp's edge. One shoved her to her knees while another fetched a scrap of paper and a stub of charcoal. Under the watchful eyes of the Circle, she wrote the words they dictated: "Please for help, a location to meet," a hint of desperation. But as she wrote, Alara tilted the charcoal. Just so, letting faint, almost invisible scratches run between the lines. A code. One only Jed would recognize from the short time they'd traveled together. Way of telling him it's a trap. When the letter was finished, they bound her again and tossed her into a small pen near the edge of camp. Inside, May sat with the baby, her arms tight around the child. Alara crawled to them, her breath shuddering. She brushed a trembling finger against her baby's cheek. "I'm here," she whispered. "I'm not leaving you again." From outside, the sound of a horse galloping away echoed into the trees. the messenger carrying her false plea to Jed. May's voice was barely a breath. "If he comes, he might die." Ilara's eyes hardened. "Then we make sure he doesn't walk into this alone." The forest was still when Ilara opened her eyes, the pale light of dawn bleeding through the canvas of the makeshift pen. Every muscle ached from the cold and from the way she'd slept half-curled around May and the baby, as if her body could shield them from everything outside. But it wasn't the chill that woke her. It was the sound. A soft rustle, far too steady to be wind. A horse moving through the trees. She knew it was him. Jed Holt. Her heart leapt, then dropped with a heavy thud. If the Iron Circle had kept their word, they'd be waiting in the trees with rifles drawn. She had no doubt that Jed could shoot his way through half a dozen men, but the circle wasn't half a dozen. They were a swarm, and they fought dirty. May stirred beside her, clutching the baby closer. "Is it him?" "Yes." Ilara's voice was tight. "We have to move before they bring him into camp." The plan had been forming in her head since the moment she'd finished writing that letter. It wasn't much of a plan, more like a desperate gamble, but if they waited, Jed would be surrounded. She scanned the pen. The door was just a lashed rope tied to a post. A guard sat slouched in a chair nearby, his hat tipped over his eyes. His rifle leaned against the post within reach. Ilara met May's gaze and mouthed, "Distract him." May hesitated, then shifted the baby to one arm and grabbed a handful of stones from the dirt. She tossed them toward the far side of the pen, where they landed with small thuds in the leaves. The guard stirred, cursing under his breath as he pushed up from the chair to investigate. That was all Ilara needed. She moved fast, fingers working the rope loose until it slipped free. She didn't stop to think, just pulled May and the baby out with her, crouching low as they slipped behind the nearest tent. A whistle cut through the air. The guard had seen them. Shouts followed, boots pounding on the hard-packed dirt. Elara grabbed May's hand. "Run." They darted between tents, the camp erupting into chaos. She could hear men shouting orders, others laughing like the hunt was just a game. Then, in the distance, she heard a rifle crack a sharp, clean shot that didn't sound like any of the circle's weapons. Jed. A single quote's pulse roared in her ears. He was close. They burst into the clearing at the edge of camp, and there he was, astride his dark bay horse, rifle in hand. His eyes locked on hers for the briefest second before swinging past to scan the camp. "Get to me!" he barked. They didn't get the chance. Two riders cut them off, their horses skidding to block the way. One swung a rope, aiming for May. But Ilara stepped in front, taking the loop across her shoulders. The jerk nearly pulled her off her feet, but she dug in, yanking back hard enough to throw the man off balance. Yet's rifle barked again, and the rider dropped, clutching his shoulder. The other rider spurred his horse straight for May, but Jed was faster. He wheeled his horse, blocking the charge and slamming his rifle butt into the man's jaw. The rider crumpled, his horse bolting into the trees. Jed was off his horse in a heartbeat, his hand closing around Ilara's arm. "You all right?" "No time, May, the baby." May was clutching the child so tightly, Ilara could see her knuckles whiten. She looked terrified but unhurt. Then came the howl of a horn from deeper in camp. The rest of the circle was coming. Jed shoved the rifle into Ilara's hands. "You can shoot?" "Yes," she lied. He didn't call her on it, just handed her the rifle and drew his revolver. "Stay close. We ride out together." They moved fast, Jed leading them back toward his horse. Shots cracked from the tree line, bullets hissing past like angry hornets. Ilara fired blindly in their direction, more to keep heads down than to hit anything. Jed swung May and the baby up onto the horse, then hauled Ilara up behind them before vaulting into the saddle himself. He dug in his spurs, and the horse lunged forward. The forest became a blur, branches whipping at their faces, the thunder of hooves behind them. Jed fired over his shoulder, picking off riders who got too close. Elara clung to May with one arm, and the rifle with the other, heart pounding with every shot fired. They broke out of the trees onto open ground, the ranch lying somewhere beyond the next ridge. But the circle wasn't giving up. Half a dozen riders were still on their tail, and the horn kept sounding, carrying a promise across the morning air. This wasn't over. Yet's voice was low, grim. Hold on. We make the ridge, we might live to see another dawn. Elara tightened her grip on the baby and glanced at Yet's profile, hard, determined, but alive. She didn't know if the ridge would save them, but she knew this. She'd fight until she couldn't stand, because this was her family now, and she wouldn't lose them. The ridge rose ahead of them, a jagged line against the pale morning sky. Yet's horse was lathered in sweat, its flanks heaving, but it didn't slow. Behind them, the Iron Circle's riders pounded across the open ground, their shouts carrying on the wind. Elara clung to May and the baby, feeling the heat of Yet's back against her arm as the horse climbed. Her fingers were raw from gripping the rifle, her body aching from the rough ride, but she didn't dare loosen her hold. They reached the crest of the ridge, and Jed pulled hard on the reins, bringing the horse to a skidding stop. Before them stretched a narrow, winding pass through the rocks. One wrong step, and the horse could tumble into the canyon below. Yet's eyes swept the terrain. This is it. We make our stand here. May's voice trembled. We can't fight them all. Jed swung down from the saddle and pulled May and the baby off, setting them behind a tall boulder. You can if you have to, he said, his voice flat but steady. Because there's no one else coming to save us. He handed Elara a second revolver. 6 shots, make 'em count. The first of the Iron Circle riders crested the ridge, their leader's face twisting into a sneer when he saw them waiting. Halt! Hand over the women, and maybe we'll let you crawl away. Jed stepped forward, his boots crunching in the gravel. Come take him. The riders spurred forward. Yet's rifle cracked once. Twice 2 men fell from their saddles. Elara raised her revolver and fired, the kick nearly knocking her back. She didn't know if she'd hit anyone, but the sound was enough to make one rider swerve. Bullets whined off the rocks. May was crouched over the baby, her hands trembling as she shielded the child. Elara dropped to one knee beside her, firing again whenever a rider came into view. Jed fought like a man who'd been here before, like every bullet had a name on it. But there were too many. For every rider that fell, 2 more came over the ridge. A shot grazed Yet's side, spinning him halfway around. Elara's heart lurched, but he stayed on his feet, teeth gritted. Jed! She shouted. He didn't answer, just reloaded with quick, practiced motions. Then his eyes locked on her, sharp even through the dust and smoke. When I say run, you take May and the baby through the pass. Don't stop, don't look back. I'm not leaving you. Not up for debate, Elara. His voice was iron. You want them safe? You move when I say. The riders regrouped for another charge. Jed moved out into the open, drawing there. Fire away from the boulder where Elara and May crouched. It was suicide, she knew it. Jed, no. Run. He roared. Elara grabbed May's arm, pulling her toward the narrow path. They stumbled over loose stones, the baby's cries mingling with the echo of gunfire. Behind them, she heard Yet's rifle until it went silent, replaced by the sharper bark of his revolver. Then, just as they reached the bend in the pass, there was a final shot. And nothing. Elara's chest felt hollow. She wanted to turn back, to see if he was still standing, but May's grip tightened, dragging her forward. They scrambled down the path, the canyon walls closing in. The sound of pursuit grew fainter, swallowed by the twists of the pass. When they finally emerged into the valley beyond, the world felt too quiet. Elara sank to her knees, the rifle slipping from her hands. May knelt beside her, the baby still, safe in her arms. For a long moment, they just breathed, alive. but incomplete dot then dash HOOFB ETS.EL are a single quotes said snapped up. Out of the haze, a lone horse stumbled into view. Jed was slumped in the saddle, blood streaking his shirt, but he was alive. He dismounted with a grunt, his legs nearly giving out. "Told you. Ridge would hold him," he said, managing a faint smile. Alara was on her feet, rushing to him before he could fall. She caught him against her shoulder, the weight of him both crushing and grounding her. "You're a damn fool," she whispered, tears blurring her vision. "Yeah," he murmured, his voice weak but steady. "But you're safe. That's all that matters." The three of them, four, counting the baby, walked together into the valley, leaving the ridge and its blood behind. They didn't know what waited ahead. But for the first time since the saloon, Ilara believed it could be something worth finding, and for the first time, she felt free.